What's going on, everybody? John Eric Paul here with my MMA news, and today's guest is coming off a unanimous decision win at UFC 295, where he defeated Kyung Ho Kang. Joined today by John Castaneda. John, thanks for being here, man. Really appreciate the time.
Yeah, absolutely, John. Thanks for having me on the show, man. I'm excited.
Yeah, man, no problem at all. I'm looking forward to today's conversation and speaking about this great performance. I guess we'll get started right there. I mean, this performance kind of had it all for you, right? There was a lot of pressure, there was power, there was endurance, a lot of great stuff all wrapped into a great 15-minute contest there. Now that you had a few days to kind of let things settle in, just how happy are you with that performance?
Yeah, absolutely. I have to be happy with a winning performance, but I'm especially happy just because this is actually my first camp ever. I've implemented a boxing coach. So my goal prior to this fight was just to have a fight with a lot more volume, and a lot, like you said, a bigger pace, a faster pace, in your face pressure, but more so like defensively, offensively, being sound and just more volume and more output. And that's exactly what I kind of delivered. I feel like, well, actually, I know. So my personal best for a fight prior to this, total strikes, I think total strikes landed anyways is maybe like 60. And I more so than doubled that. And I almost had 200 strikes thrown throughout the entire fight. So for me, it was a personal win on a level that, I worked something specifically in camp and it delivered on fight night. And that's kind of the biggest win for me.
And with hiring the boxing coach too, I mean, these are kind of like the little things, I guess, as you grow in the career, you kind of make those tweaks to it and always growing and evolving. Obviously, it played itself out. I was just curious, is this obviously gonna go ahead and guess is a dumb question, but boxing coach is gonna stick around, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm super excited. Honestly, it's extra motivation and it's extra like love. Not that I lack love for the sport, but it's an extra addition to kind of look forward to. You know what I mean? I very much look forward to bettering my craft and honing in on my training and fixing up the holes in my games or to my best. So I'm super excited to kind of just keep building off of this work that I've put in and kind of keep going with it and just be on a different level of a mixed martial artist.
All right, so now before we get into some of these fight specifics, I do have a few things I wanted to ask you about. One of which they mentioned on the broadcast. I'm not sure if I heard it correctly or not, so I just wanted you to elaborate on it. Did they mention something about you were working another job mostly, and this is like your first time that you were able to quit working the other job and focus full time on fighting?
No, so I talked to DC. DC's funny, man. I was listening back to that too, and honestly, I don't know if he just was not paying attention when we had the actual interview prior to the fight, or maybe he just misspoke. But what I had mentioned to him was, the first fight on my new contract was Muin Gafurov, my previous fight before this. Up until that fight, I was working full time. So up until earlier or at the very beginning of 2023, let's just say like December of last year, January of this year, I it was my last fight on my contract. I had gone 2-2 in my first contract. I didn't know if I was going to get re-signed or not. With that knowledge, quit my job. I quit my job and I just said, you know what, I'm going to go fully embrace myself in the sport of martial arts, and I'm going to kind of resubmerge myself I was doing this thing where I was working full time and I was training full time, but I felt like I was kind of half-assing both, if that makes sense. And sorry for my language, but um, so I went to Thailand for about 3 months, and I spent all the way up until March of this year. I spent a good amount of time in Thailand, and kind of just like I said, resubmerged myself in being a full time athlete. Picked up a lot of good habits, and then I came back home to Minnesota and kind of implemented those habits in my training, right? And so then I fought in June. Muin Gafurov would have been my first fight not working full time, and then obviously, I picked up a decision win there. Kept kept on the gas and like I said, hired my new boxing coach and kind of just kept training and looking to elevate my skill set. And then I fought here in November. So that's kind of where I'm at, and that's kind of how the job kind of plays into my life.
Gotcha. And I know you had mentioned training in Thailand. I did see the photos there on your Instagram training over at Bong Tao with the Hickman brothers. A lot of respect for those guys. They're great coaches. Just what was that experience like being over there?
Oh, it was crazy. So I wouldn't have it any other way to kind of like re-solidify myself as a full-time athlete. I went over there, and they're first and foremost that facility is unreal. Like, it's state of the art. Really, really like great weather, right? Every single day you're in tropical weather. That gym is no more than like a football field's length to the beach and the ocean. And then yeah, I can't speak well enough about the coaching there. You know, not only do they have the Hickman brothers, but they have a really, really good Thai program as well that kind of complements the MMA program there. Their jiu-jitsu coach, Alex, is just unreal and on a different level. And their strength coach Woody, who runs all like the fitness classes, is a great coach as well. All four of those guys are leading the pack, and it's very good vibes, very good energy. The gym, like I said, facility is top of the line, so really cool.
All right, so let's get into the fight now here itself. I guess we'll get started with a few things that happened, I guess, in the lead up to the fight. I know there was a catch weight for this fight, right? Problem with an infection. Can you just explain what all happened with that?
Yeah, so let's go back to a couple fights ago for me, Daniel Santos, right? I fought Daniel Santos. I had a staph infection that fight, and I noticed during camp that I was just like lethargic, low energy. There was a couple days where I had a fever, and I knew it was because of the staph infection. So um, I went ahead and I just told myself like, I'm gonna fight it out, whatever. During the fight, I felt zapped from not only the infection but like the antibiotics as well. I noticed that I was running a lot heavier during that camp than I normally am, and I talked to some people, some nutritionists, some doctors, and they said that it was most likely because of the antibiotic that I was taking. It kind of just tends to retain a lot of water. So I got ahead of it this time, and I asked my management if he could reach out to the UFC about possibly catch weight. And the reason being is because the staph infection and the antibiotics and stuff like that. And I was ready to make 136 regardless, but I think their camp, obviously traveling from North Korea, a big long haul of travel. Maybe he was running a little bit heavy too. I don't know, but he accepted it, and yeah, that's why we met at 138. Also, I would have pulled out from the fight if I felt any sort of previous symptoms like I did in the Daniel Santos fight, like during camp where I was low energy, fever, stuff like that. But this camp was great. At the very peak of the infection, the skin infection, I had no tells during training. I was still full of energy, full of life, and sleeping good, feeling good. Everything was good. But like I said, I just wanted to get ahead of it in case something went wrong with the weight cut.
Gotcha. And I'm sure, obviously, your opponent, like you said, they're probably in the same boat too. He's probably happy with it too. I'm sure any fighter, really, if you have an excuse not to cut those few extra pounds, I'm
Absolutely.
sure it's all in the cards.
Yeah, and absolutely, and that's what I tell myself as well. Because we're all cutting weight. There's no chance. And I mean, you watch the fight, and you've seen his stature. He's a big guy. He's a big guy for 35. Tall, lengthy, but he's filled out as well. So he's obviously cutting some weight. And yeah, we're all doing it. So if we can kind of refrain from cutting the last 2 pounds, I'm sure he was happy about it as well. But yeah, there was no, I'd like to get ahead of it, as opposed to possibly like let's just say worst case scenario, I miss weight and they scratch our fight completely and now we're not fighting. You know what I mean? So got ahead of it. Closed mouth never gets fed, right?
Exactly. So let's talk now just a little bit about New York City a little bit and just this whole fight atmosphere for you, right? This is your first time being on a pay-per-view event. Obviously, we know how, the excitement level for those types of cards go up. You have your ceremonial weigh-ins with a big packed house there and all that stuff. Just what was the whole fight week like just in the lead up to the fight, being in New York City, having this big massive event and everything like that?
Yeah, no, it was on a different level. Obviously, I made my UFC debut in Abu Dhabi during the pandemic, so it was very much so a light crowd, very scarce, and kind of like personnel only, right? The next four fights after that, I fought at the Apex. So again, also very much light crowd, personnel, and just like maybe a handful of people in the crowd. So this was definitely on a whole new level. The crowd was electric. I fought very early on in the card, but even when I fought, the arena was loud. It was packed, and obviously not as packed as during the main card and stuff like that, but it was getting there. And the crowd itself was electric. It was loud, and it was awesome. It was a great experience. I can't wait to do it again. I can't wait to be a part of more larger crowds and larger pay per view cards.
All right, let's get into the fight now itself here a little bit. Opening round, right? First off, we're having a crowd and everything. We're able to hear your coaching corner pretty loudly on the broadcast. They picked it up a lot of it there. They were saying, what, circle the hip or whatever, something along those lines.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it was a great round for you. I mean, I thought you won the round. I know you said afterwards, when just right there inside the cage, you thought you lost that round. I'm sure you watched the fight back. Just your thoughts on that opening round.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The opening round was definitely the toughest, and rightfully so. I feel like that's kind of the round where both fighters are making their reads, making their adjustments. Getting kind of trying to figure out the rhythm of the opponent, and that's kind of what I was doing too. I was very very much patient, especially with watching Kang's most recent fight against another Mexican fighter, Quinones. Quinones had him hurt pretty early on in the fight, and kind of just started pressuring after he felt that Kyung Ho Kang was hurt, and then he got caught and he got finished. So I kind of played that in my mind a lot. The first round was the closest of the three for our fight. So when it's close in any regards, I always just chalk it up mentally as a loss because you never know with the scoring of the judging, right? And especially I can't play it safe. If I'm either gunning for a finish, or I know that I decisively won every single round. So when there's a round that you can't really decisively say I won that round, I chalk it up as a loss every single time, and it motivates me to do better the next round and solidify an absolute win either via finish or I secured that round, no doubt, right? And that's exactly what I did. I chalked it up as a loss in my head. So I told myself mentally, okay, I got to come out strong second, and then even stronger in the third, and that's exactly what I did. But yeah, in a sense of pace wise, the round very much was a feel out round, and we're kind of just trying to get each other's tempos down.
And it didn't matter whether it was round one, two, or three. Those leg kicks were there all day for you. Was that the game plan coming in to chop away at his leg like that? Because it was so effective in the fight.
Absolutely, it was, and honestly, the two biggest factors in this fight, game plan wise, were chipping away at the body and chipping away at the leg. So I know that he likes to throw actually a lot of naked leg kicks, and his style is actually a very very upright boxing style. So he was very very much like flat footed a lot of the time, standing very very tall in a sense of like almost like a boxer, right? So I knew the body was going to be there hands down, and that's what me and my boxing coach implemented. The body shots were going to be there, and once I started tagging up the body a little bit, not only with straight lefts but also kicks, those leg kicks to the legs were going to open up a lot more too once I started touching the body a little bit more. So yes, that those two things were the top things that I was that we were working on in camp.
And then I guess just one last thing, fight wise here. You're able to mix in takedown attempts, get a couple, at least one or two. I don't remember the exact number on it, but you had a few takedowns mixed in there. Just talk about that, being able to implement that and just put that final foot on the gas, that third round, then and seal the deal.
Yeah, so wrestling is my first sport, my first martial arts that I learned. I grew up a wrestler, and honestly, before the UFC, that was my style. I was a take you down, grind you down style, right? But ever since I got into the UFC, I know how it works. I know that I need to be more dynamic. I need to be more exciting. I need to be more well rounded to not only make a name for myself, but stand a chance against some of the top 15 fighters in the world. So that's what I've kind of like let go from wrestling more in the UFC than I have ever previously. I had, let's say, I think I had 20 fights professionally before the UFC. And I can say safely that before that, I was wrestling nonstop. So wrestling is my home. To be able to mix up the wrestling in between my fight is obviously a huge perk, but it's something that I'm very comfortable doing. I actually was able to secure three takedowns this fight, three takedowns my last two fights actually as well. So now it's three fights in a row with three takedowns each in all the fights. The threat is always there. My conditioning, my cardio will always be there, and I feel very very good and very safe with my wrestling.
Well, it was a great performance, really complete performance too at that. And I got to ask one other thing before we start wrapping things up here. You got to
Yeah.
meet Joe Rogan afterwards. I know you're a big Joe Rogan fan. Just what was that like, and being able to get a photo with him?
Oh, it was unreal. Like I said, I've been watching him even before I was um, before when I was still fighting locally and growing up and stuff, I was watching Fear Factor. And so I was a big fan of Joe Rogan then. And then he kind of started picking up steam and status. And I was watching, now I'm in the fight game. So I'm listening to the Joe Rogan podcast. There was a couple of years there, probably 3 or 4 years on my come up that I was listening to Joe Rogan almost every single day, if not every day. So the podcast was cool. I love watching it, especially when you're into the sport of martial arts and into the kind of the same topics that he is. So to be able to meet him and have him call my fight was super cool, off the bucket list. And we're, continue the journey.
And that journey is going to continue on here in 2024. That's where I wanted to go to next here. Obviously, great 2023. Went 2-0 on the year. 4-2 now in the UFC. Starting to build some momentum, some steam going forward here. What's kind of the outlook for the new year here?
Yeah, I've been very, very diligent on keeping certain people in my headspace and kind of vocalizing it. But I really want to fight against some top 15 guys, if not some guys who are right there on the cusp, like Adrian Yanez. I think that's definitely one guy that I want to fight. And I actually called him out and he responded to it. So, I know he just had surgery on his leg or his knee or something like that. So I don't want it to impede on my timeline as to when I want to come back, but I want to come back early next year. I know December and January are basically already booked for UFC cards. So I want to either hop in early February or early March for my first time in 2024. And I would love for it to be against, someone like Adrian Yanez. I think that stylistically we can put on a banger of a fight. But also I know that stylistically I'm a nightmare for him. His wrestling is not up to par with mine. His jiu-jitsu is not up to par with mine. He's a small 35er. So I got size on him. His wrestling, like I think I already touched base on that. Actually, it's just non-existent. And also MMA math doesn't really check out ever, right? It's not a thing. It's non-existent. But there's also something to be said about me dominating a guy who has a win over Adrian Yanez. So I don't know if he'll take the fight. But if he does, that's something that I want. Like I said, he's on the cusp of the top 15. If not, I would love a fight also with Saeed, ranked number 15 right now. I'm pretty sure he just fought Muin Gafurov, who I also just fought. So it kind of just makes sense as well.
All right, John, I appreciate all the time here today, man, and great performance again. Congratulations on the win there. Last thing before you head out for the day, you're going to get the last word here. If you want to go ahead, plug your social media so people know where to follow you at, management, sponsorships, all that good stuff. Take it away. Floor is yours.
Absolutely. Appreciate you, John. So yeah, first and foremost, you guys can follow me at John Castaneda _ on Instagram. That's really the only social media I'm really active on. But if you type in John Castaneda, you'll find all the other ones as well. First and foremost, I want to thank my management team that honestly, without them, like none of this is possible. Jason House, obviously getting me into the UFC a couple of years ago, and the whole team behind Iridium Sports. We got Jacob, we got Jeremy, and we got someone who kind of flies under the radar a lot is Ed Cap. He sets up all my interviews, all my all my PR. So Ed Cap, big hats off to you, and thank you so much, brother. Your stuff does not go unnoticed. Everyone at the Minnesota Martial Arts Academy, all my coaches, my head coach, Greg Nelson, my jiu-jitsu coach, Andy Gran, Nat McIntyre, my wrestling coach, Joseph Deshu. It's all impossible without you guys. My strength coach, Luke Redberg. So everybody, every single one of my teammates, my coaches, we're all a big part of the success here.